Okay, so we have a panel discussing innovating in the widespread electrification of transportation. Please welcome, to welcome our panelists, I'm going to introduce the moderator, Devashish Paul, CEO and founder of BluWave-ai. Over to you, Devashish.
Hi, everyone. My name is Devashish Paul. I'm CEO and founder of BluWave-ai. We're a tech startup based in Ottawa, Canada, whose focus is to use data from our customers who are industrial, utility, and fleet operators to predict, optimize, and better utilize how energy is used in real life networks and reduce the amount of carbon that we burn on the streets and in our utilities. Today, I'm honored to chair this panel at World Summit AI with a number of very esteemed speakers who come to us from Proterra, Walmart Canada, Alaska Airlines, and MV Transit. Our speakers will introduce themselves shortly, and they will tell you about some of the challenges they have with respect to electrification of transportation. Once we do the introductions, we'll launch into a series of very interesting topics that for the practitioners in this panel are old stories, or at least they're living those stories. For you in the audience who might be more focused on the data and AI world, it'll give you hardcore examples of the real challenges of the world of transportation, of EVs, and what some of the challenges are that AI can potentially solve. So with that, I'll have Stina Brock from Proterra introduce herself.
Thanks. So I'm Stina Brock, and I currently lead Proterra's software business. I am focused on how we can help our customers manage their electric fleets, extend the lives of their batteries, and optimize energy costs. Proterra is a leader in producing commercial electric vehicle technology. And we do that through the past 10 years of work on developing electric transit vehicles. And then over the last couple of years, we've built up the Proterra Powered Business Unit, which is where we take our batteries and our powertrains and help other OEMs electrify their vehicles. And our third business unit is called Proterra Energy, and that's where I live. And what we're trying to do with Proterra Energy is help enable our customers to be successful with electrifying those vehicle fleets. And that means providing hardware for charging. That means helping with planning and infrastructure development. And it also means helping to manage energy costs once people start to electrify their fleets. So looking forward to talking with you all.
Thank you, Stina. And for the audience, where is your corporation based? And maybe share with them some of your key markets.
Yes, that's great. So our headquarters are in the US in California, as well as in South Carolina, and we have people spread across the country. We also have work internationally, and our main markets are basically those markets in the US, Canada, and in Europe, and looking at other opportunities in Asia as well.
Okay. So since we're playing at the World Summit AI in Amsterdam, Stina, good luck and covering off all of Amsterdam in the future. So over to Francis Lalonde at Walmart.
Morning, afternoon, everybody, wherever you are in the world. Francis Lalonde, thank you for having me. I'm the Vice President, Transportation for Walmart Canada. We're early adopters of the journey towards electrification. We're excited to be here today, share our objectives to Walmart Canada, what we are excited about, what are some of the challenges we're facing as well, and looking forward to the discussion with everybody else.
Thanks, Francis. And just so people understand, where in Walmart's network would electric vehicles end up being first deployed?
So it would be in Canada. We have 3 hubs in Canada. So hub number 1 is Toronto. It's the first units. And after that, hub number 2 is Calgary. And then hub number 3 would be Cornwall in Eastern Ontario, closer to Montreal.
And those hubs are where all the goods are basically shipped to, and then they go from the hubs out to the stores, I imagine.
You got it. That's where all our distribution centers are. Most of them.
Okay. And you have some cargo that is that doesn't require refrigeration, but you do have cargo that also has a high energy load from refrigeration. Is that correct?
Absolutely. And we'll talk about it in terms of the added complexity later for sure.
Okay, awesome. Over to Shane Jones at Alaska Airlines. Shane.
Hi, everyone. My name is Shane Jones. I'm the Vice President of Real Estate and Airport Development at Alaska Airlines. And what that means is I basically oversee all of our airport infrastructure at Alaska. Alaska is the 5th largest airline in the US, the largest carrier on the West Coast, and we're a proud member of One World. We have over 300 aircraft and we serve 120 destinations. My interest in this space is really about sustainability, and we currently have 34% of our ground service equipment. Think about like baggage tugs and aircraft tow bar or aircraft tow equipment that is electrified today, but we want to get to close to 100% of that. And so I'm really interested in seeing how we can most effectively and efficiently deploy more electric equipment, and how do we optimize the use of that equipment.
Excuse me. Shane, for our audience in Europe, Alaska Airlines does not just operate in Alaska. Perhaps just convey to them the breadth of your operations.
Thank you for that opportunity. We're often mistaken for just a state of Alaska carrier. It's our traditional home name, but we actually operate, we're headquartered in Seattle. We operate hubs in Seattle, Portland, San Francisco, LA, Anchorage. We fly, like I mentioned, we're the largest carrier on the West Coast, but we fly all over the US, to Mexico, to Costa Rica, to Canada. And of course, we connect our passengers to the world through our One World partnerships.
Thank you, Shane. That provides some context for those who might not be aware. And finally, Jim Haring from MV Transit. Over to you.
Thanks, Dev. Hey, I am Jim Haring, by the way. Really appreciate the invite and what a great opportunity to participate in this panel. I am the CIO of MV Transportation. You might wonder why a CIO would be mostly interested, but like Dev, we believe in the future world, data and technology is going to play a bigger role, especially with a zero emission fleet. And we talk about efficiency, so we can talk about that. But we are the largest private transportation provider in the United States. We provide, and we have a little bit of business in Canada as well, but we provide mostly fixed route services, which you're may be familiar with in your city. We also provide paratransit. That's about 50% of our business. That's an area of extreme interest for us. You might be used to a fixed route circulator, but paratransit, every 24 hours, we create a brand new schedule with traffic and weather events in the major cities across the country. And our cargo is some of the most vulnerable in society, those with mobility needs. And so that's an area we care deeply about. Service continuity and planning are really important. And again, as we go forward, we are headquartered in Dallas. We do have a little bit of business in Canada as well. But going forward, I really think what we believe, again, data and companies like BluWave and data science will play a huge role in the efficiency and really service continuity for what we do, which is just so important for us. Thank you, Dev.
Okay, awesome. So for those of us who are the AI propeller heads around here, our audience knows that AI can be used very effectively early in planning stages, and then it can be used in live networks for operations. So those are going to be the first couple of topics we're going to talk. We'll get the inputs from our panelists on. So I'm going to start off with Francis from Walmart, because they got they got big challenges in terms of both planning and then eventually operations. You're sitting on a world of data in terms of your existing fleets, and I think you would like to see eventually how this all gets converted to electrification.
Absolutely, Dev. It's really there's two big goals for us. There's zero emission by 2040. That's a Walmart world goal, which is amazing. And then our little Canadian goal, not so little, is to be alternately powered by 2028. And we are well on the way to that. I committed us to this one about 2 years ago now. So it's critical for us that we move forward and very, very fast on that journey. Lots of Got some complexity in the planning piece around it, which is the question, Dev. Two things really stand out. I think one around infrastructure a lot, which is a very, very complex one for us to be ready to welcome all this additional power that we will have in all of our distribution centers. We've been working on this for 2 years, right? Speaking of the importance of planning the event, we've been working for quite a bit of time on this. And then the second piece, and we're there on the RDCs, we're not there on stores and the other components when we start to go further out in our journey. And the second piece is how do we integrate those new vehicles into our fleet? So we have a fleet of diesel trucks. Obviously, we're in a pretty big operation. I got about 600 drivers across Canada right now driving a lot of miles. We got about 500,000 loads going through third party as well. So between our fleet and eventually welcoming the third party folks coming into that journey as well adds complexity. So now we have to calculate charging infrastructure, charging time, range. I don't want to have any of those operational headaches, obviously, as we go through that journey. So it's a big one for us to finalize the infrastructure on one side, and then make sure that we have the proper operationalization of that fleet once it gets in, and that's where AI is going to really, really help us.
Thanks, Francis. So not to make this competitive, but I am because the faster all you guys electrify, the more opportunities for BluWave-ai and all the people at World Summit AI. So I'm going to turn over to Shane Jones. So he happens to have a 5 to 6 year head start on Walmart, but it seems like your finish line of 2040 for your corporation is the same as Shane's. But you're trying to one up your corporation, Francis, with 2028, I think. So Shane, you guys have been rolling since 2015, I think, or 2016 with electrification. And the point I want to make here is the planning stage is not a one-off. There's onboarding of electrification, and there's continuous incremental planning for a larger penetration of electric fleets that is potentially ongoing or to new locations. So Shane has incremental, and Shane has empire building plans of leading all of the US in terms of electrification, or maybe I'm putting words in your mouth. So over to you, Shane.
No, I'm good with those aggressive goals, but like Walmart, we do have a goal of being carbon neutral by 2040. And of course, as an airline, that's extremely challenging to get to offset carbon and to find ways to reduce your carbon emissions when you fly jets and you burn jet fuel. So we have to really attack our sustainability initiatives across a number of fronts, whether it's sustainable aviation fuel, electrification of vehicles, and a whole host of number of other initiatives. Sometimes it's actually easier to try to do things that are on the ground. That includes our EGSE. And so we've actually deployed 425 pieces of electric ground service equipment here in Seattle. And that includes about 250 chargers. And so we've also deployed it in LA. But like I said, we've only deployed it across 34% of our overall vehicles. And so we have a goal of getting to 100%. We may not quite get to 100% because there are some things electric vehicles can't quite do, like tow an aircraft across the entire airport. But as we continue to roll this out, I think what we've done thus far is we've been opportunistic in where we have infrastructure, putting in the infrastructure to enable EGSE, and then replacing our diesel with electric GSE. But it's not been, I would say, it's more opportunistic and not been fully planned out. And so as we now have data for the last 4, 5, 6 years here in Seattle, we really can use AI to help us plan for how many chargers do we need in various airports? How many ground service equipment can that actually support? Is there a way to plan for the future, and particularly when in places where we're growing more, Portland, California, where we don't want to just plan to replace what we have today. We want to plan for our needs 10 years from now. And you may not know, but airport infrastructure is highly constrained, and it takes a long time to implement the pipeline in terms of electric capacity, as well as to install GSE equipment, charging equipment. So it's a years in the making in the process. And so we want to get ahead of that as we try to meet our goals.
Thanks, Shane. Part of the planning that you are engaged in also involves collecting more data. So I think early on you didn't have as much data as you needed to make intelligent decisions for future planning. You guys have decided to meter out a whole breadth of equipment, from my understanding.
That's right. We do have data that we get from the airport. They actually own the charging equipment. We have some limited data from the equipment itself, but it hasn't been a holistic approach of looking at the data and how do we use. So we have some data already, but we actually in this past year have rolled out basically tagging all of our equipment. So we're constantly tracking the equipment, when it's in use, when it's being charged, and of course what the charging levels are. And so I think there's a mountain of data and opportunity that we're going to be collecting that we can then utilize to go implement.
So for those in the audience, we all get excited when the end users decide to meter and get a lot of data. And clearly, Alaska Airlines sees the value both in the planning stage and the operation stage. With that, I'm going to actually turn it over to Stina. So Stina's vehicles, they're basically computers on wheels that move people around. Maybe you can help the rest of us understand the type of information that you've been able to use to help customers in planning. If you want to actually delve into the operational side of it, Stina, we can get rolling on that because I'm going to hand it over to Jim afterwards, who's got to deal with all of that. But you're basically preparing the type of exercise that Shane's going through in terms of acquiring the data so then they can subsequently make better decisions. You're already provisioning that with your end customers, right?
Yeah, that's right, Dev. We do have a team within Proterra Energy that is focused on the planning side to help our customers figure out, what types of vehicles they need, how many vehicles, how they can electrify over time as they're looking to maximize, the amount of EVs that they have in their fleet. And there's a lot of work that goes into thinking about how much energy you're going to need at that site in order to do this over the next couple of years. And it's pretty complex. So we do try to help our customers manage utility conversations and thinking about the infrastructure that will be needed. And then that does move into the operational side. So once you understand your energy needs and you get your infrastructure in place, then you want to be really smart about how you're managing those charging operations so that you have a high utilization rate with the infrastructure that you have there, and that you can ensure that your vehicles will have maximum uptime, of course. And so I think that's where the data really comes in, like you guys are talking about. We gather data from many sources. I've realized since starting the last couple months here at Proterra, and it is challenging to pull all that together and make that easily available for customers so that they can, determine how to turn that into useful information. So, but I think that's more critical than ever with electric vehicles compared to, standard processes. So again, I agree with what Shane said. This is where AI becomes really interesting and useful for customers to figure out how to manage these complex sources of data and put them together so that they turn into operational plans for then how you can make sure you're charging those vehicles successfully. So there's a lot in there that we could unpack. It would be interesting to hear from James' perspective too, how they've managed to do that.
There you go. I don't even have to do the panel job. So James, it's
Stina.
my job.
Yeah, when you think about data sources, we might have a couple others. So what's important for us to run our business is really two things. We need vehicles on the street, which brings in maintenance. So you have to learn about maintaining these vehicles. How often do they fail? And what happens if I do have a road call, for example, and what kind of spare capacity? The other is I need operators to operate those today until we can get a vehicle on the street that doesn't need an operator. But for now, we still need operators. And to do that, I have to have the proper number of vehicles to match the service, to match the need of my ridership. And so I think about all the data sources I need for that. Number one, right now, one of the most important ones for us is operators in the buses. So if I get all the buses on the street, there's a huge labor shortage in the country right now across. I think we're down maybe over 1,000 operators from where we would need to be, which puts pressure on my workforce. So, data around how do I track, how do I differentiate, how do I make this a compelling job? But our customers expect us to be efficient and on time, because I'm carrying personnel, and this is personnel that want equal access. They may be taking it to work. They can't be late. So I have to be on time, but then they also want it to be efficient. It needs to be affordable. There's many times that many of our riders don't have the means to take a car to work. So they count on this for their employment. Our paratransit business, people may take it to a dialysis appointment, et cetera. So some of these, not to over exaggerate, some of these have people's health in their hands. So what's the things that can affect that? If a vehicle goes down, I still need to get them to their appointment, to your point. What if I miss a charging cycle? I worry about those things. What if my traffic changes? What if the weather changes? All those factors come in, and it's going to be a huge planning challenge for everyone. Getting the first bus and getting it charged is a challenge on its own, but that's why I said for us, service continuity is a really, really big deal. But going forward, we think all those data sources are going to become really, really relevant for us running a proper service.
Hey, thanks. I'm going to just put in a bit of a plug for some of the work that my colleagues here at BluWave are doing. We just finished off this offline planning phase for Dubai Taxi. They got a fleet of 5,000 taxis on the ground. There's 200 that are already provided by Elon Musk and crew to basically get them rolling on the path to electrification. And basically what we did was we took their historical data from 2.5 years of operating those EVs. And there's two parts to operating these EVs. One is the cost optimization and keeping the holistic cost of energy down. But both James, you with your paratransit, and Shane with your kind of flexible aviation. When I say kind of flexible aviation operations, there's always flights that are late, gates get reprovisioned, and so forth. So in operations, the AI's got to react to the possibility. In a taxi fleet, there's downtime from charging, but you could be getting revenue at the same time. So you don't want them downtime charging when you can go get revenue. In the case of a 737 MAX coming into another gate, you want to send an electric vehicle out there if you can have it ready and react to the changing dynamic in your network. So Shane, maybe you can just comment on that from an operations angle, and what some of your desires are for our audience, who, our audience we're always looking at how our tool, our hammer, we're walking around with an AI hammer and everything looks like a nail to us. And, ideally people like yourselves go, there's some nails I have for you guys to bang on and build me something good. Maybe you can talk about that operational dynamic a bit.
Sure. Yeah. Operating at an airport, and particularly a hub operation, is a bit like controlled chaos. You start with call it your network plan, how many flights you're going to fly, where they're going to go, when they're going to leave. And that starts about 6 months out, 9 months out. Then you get to 30 days out and you sort of plan, all right, here's where the aircraft are going to park, which gates. And then comes the actual day of operation, and everything you plan for does not match exactly what you're doing on that day at all. And that's because of things like having to rotate aircraft to different cities for maintenance, having to deal with delays, having to deal with weather, having to deal with ATC delays. So it's constantly changing and dynamic, and we have to adapt to that. What I would say is on the electric vehicle front, the challenge for us is because it's always constantly dynamic and changing, we really don't have a good set schedule of, okay, we're going to have this piece of equipment on operating for 8 hours, then we're going to charge it for 4 hours, and then 8 hours and 4. We don't have the luxury of that. Often we are just simply using the GSE until it runs out of power, and we're plugging it in and going and grabbing another piece of equipment. Yeah. And so I'd like to say we're really smart about how we optimize our charging, but we are not. And that's where I see the opportunity with more information and AI, in that we are running sort of a plug and play, so to speak, in terms of we charge when we can, but we operate when we have to. In a lot of cases, we are running an 18-hour per day operation, and we only have 6 hours of charging overnight. And so we have run into situations where, because of the dynamic operating environment, that we've run out of a charged equipment and have had to supplement diesel, which is clearly suboptimal and goes against our sustainability goals. So the optimizing how we use the equipment is sort of the first big opportunity. And then, of course, being the more cost-efficient charging is the next opportunity. And particularly in places like California, where electricity is a lot more expensive and has peaks and valleys, we can be a lot smarter about how we charge, when we charge. So it's a pretty exciting opportunity.
Okay, thanks, Shane. And Francis, some of what Shane's going through, I think you all anticipate that, but I would suspect that your network is less controlled chaos than an airport, in an airport environment. Jim, your paratransit is is maybe a bit more chaos, but your fixed routes are well, they're fixed routes, but they're affected by weather, traffic, and activities. Francis, maybe you could take a minute or so to talk about what Walmart anticipates.
Yeah,
And
no, we definitely have some of that chaos when we have, winter storm and we have 100 loads coming back late. So a few things we're on the lookout for, right? Obviously, our loads are mission critical for us, right? We deliver product at night to our stores. We receive the product and it's right off the gate, it's going on the shelves. So we need to be efficient, can't afford to have downtime. So that service component to our customers is one of our most important metrics, probably the most important one after safety, which I'm proud of. So there's a few things near and dear to our hearts that we anticipate, aside from some of the elements that the other panelists have covered already, but even incorporating the units. At which run rate do you incorporate the units is a complexity as well. Do I bring in 10 trucks this year, or do I bring in 100 trucks? Right? How many new EV trucks can I bring in? For us, we're running a day cab model. So basically, we're going home. Our drivers are back home every night. But then how do we start to integrate those further out runs? Because now I need to have charging infrastructures on the road. Are we ready for that? Yeah, not ready yet, right? So. Complexity on how do we integrate this one, and once we have it, then how do we manage that data, and how do we plan for refueling at this one because it's 200 kilometers out or 300 kilometers out, so it's added complexity. And we mentioned the temperature controlled environment. The reefers as well are important for us. Our journey is to be zero emission. I'm not going to show up to a store with a brand new electric truck and a diesel reefer in the back. So we have to figure out how we're going to integrate electric, solar reefers. How do we manage all of that as well, so that we don't have operational concerns on this side as well. So to your previous comment about all this additional data we have to manage, these are lots of different inputs that we were not controlling. So really have to consolidate all this and have a good, strong output so that my operators can operate properly.
So Stina and James, in terms of one of the things that Francis brought up is this en route charging. What's your experience with the flexibility that municipalities or transit authorities have? Are they all gravitating towards depot-based charging, or will there be opportunity charging along the way? And now you got this distributed charging, distributed loads, and you have to grab data from everything and make heads or tails of it. Maybe 30 seconds to each one of you, and then it looks like we're going to be running out of time momentarily. So if Stina, if you could warm us up with your view as someone who's touching on a bunch of end users.
Yeah, absolutely. So we provide a bunch of different charging hardware solutions, because we know that there are a lot of different types of chargers that people need, whether that's en route, like pantograph charging, or whether they, want really high powered charging in their depots and things in between. So especially on the transit side, I think we're seeing a lot of interest in a mix there. The other piece on the data side for charging is, you can look at all of these different data points, everything from how a driver is braking on their route, to, weather and elevation changes, that sort of thing. So I think, the way that routes are scheduled today is based on, traditional vehicles. And so I think it'll be interesting to see how that changes over time and what mix of hardware and sort of data-driven decisions get put together for electric fleets.
So, James, you can't cook the passengers when it's 102 degrees in Dallas in July, and just to save energy, you need to air condition them and en route charging. How would that work out?
Yeah, and heated in Seattle. Look, we need more. I love the way Shane talked about our business, similar long range planning, short term planning, but for us, it's all about the live day. Right, every day, especially during, you think a global pandemic, every day, if 20 operators call off versus 10 during the live day, but vehicle capacity is a big deal for us. So until there's more of that, we have to sort of plan for the worst, frankly. So we have to assume even if a vehicle can go 200 miles, we can only plan maybe 120 or 150, right? Which is maybe wasted capacity in that, because I have to allow for that. I have to allow for a passenger who might, maybe a passenger with oxygen who has some sort of attack. I have to allow for that. I have to be able to get my vehicle home. So that live day operation, the infrastructure planning certainly is way behind the vehicle planning. That's our favorite thing. We buy a lot of buses, but the long range infrastructure planning isn't there. But yeah, so I think vitally important. On-site storage, I think, is going to become hugely important. Not a lot of people invest in it today. I think they will. They'll have to. Right, because a major city has a power outage for 6 hours. Do I not run service the next day now? I don't think that'll be an option. So I really think there's going to be a shift to a lot more on-site.
All right, thanks. I really appreciate all the inputs from the panelists. For our audience, what you heard is the equivalent of taking a computer from a flight simulator and then taking it into a live aircraft and flying it. And the fighter jet lands with its rubber side down. And that's what these guys are trying to do. They want their network to be operating like a fighter jet, landing every day with the rubber side down and not losing energy in mid-flight and screwing up the whole mission. There is huge promise for data and AI to enable this electrification of transport. Obviously, at BluWave, we feel we're at the forefront of it with a number of patents and products in operation, and look forward to basically transforming the world's hardware deployments with better utilization with data and AI. So thank you, everyone. Thank you, the audience, and hope to be live in Amsterdam or wherever this summit is next year.
Thank you. Wow, that was really fascinating. I really enjoyed hearing specifically around some of their zero carbon emissions goals, and also some of the challenges that technology is helping to solve, things around charging and data points and infrastructure. So all these things are starting to become themes today, hearing about how technology is able to, and especially around AI and data sets, and how this is really influencing all aspects of our future, especially around these areas.